Rams house. We've got some brand new details around Matthew Stafford's contract extension on today's episode of the Rams Report, presented by Prize Picks. And guys, when you get into the nitty-gritty of this, when we dive into it, you're going to see the Rams are exploiting NFL rules here, taking advantage of NFL rules here, being a little sneaky even, you might say, taking advantage of a loophole to save themselves some money and also to take care of their guy, Matthew Stafford. So we're going to explain the mechanism of all of that on today's show. But before we get into it, I've got to provide you with the answer to earlier's trivia question. We just put out a video earlier today. If you missed it, in it, I asked you guys a trivia question, and I promised I would answer it at the end of that show. I totally forgot to do so. My bad. But the answer to the trivia question, which for those of you who missed the question at the start, it was which Rams undrafted free agent received the most guaranteed cash on their contract in Rams history, since Dan Valeri received the second most yesterday. And the answer is Josh Wallace. Rams corner Josh Wallace got the most guaranteed cash of any Rams undrafted free agent ever when he received $60,000 in guarantees in 2024, $15K more than Dan Valeri. Pretty impressive when you consider 2 years have passed and NFL numbers continue to rise pretty much every year. So that's the trivia question answered for you. Let's talk Matthew Stafford. So this all begins with Tom Pelissero's tweet, where Tom shared a lot of details around Matthew Stafford's contract. And when I say a lot of details around Matthew Stafford's contract, I mean a lot of details around Matthew Stafford's contract, guys. This is like a novel of a tweet. So we're going to go through the whole thing, and then I'm going to break down all of the nerd lawyer mumbo jumbo into something a little more digestible for you. So let's get started here. Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford's recently revised contract includes rolling guarantee triggers after the 2026 and 2027 seasons, creating flexibility and allowing both sides to continue evaluating the reigning NFL MVP's future each of the next two offseasons. We'll continue here. Stafford is still due $40 million in 2026. Remember that 2026 contract is not part of this extension that was already in place. That's very important for something we're going to talk about later. And now also has a $5 million guaranteed roster bonus in March of 2027. His $45 million base salary in 2027 and a $5 million March 2028 roster bonus become fully guaranteed if he's still on the roster on the third day of the 2027 league year, meaning a decision for next season will come by mid-March. Keep that in the back of your head. That is going to be important. Next season, by mid-March, we're going to know exactly what Stafford is going to do because of this part of the contract, which is, or actually, no, this is the 2028 part of the contract, excuse me. But we will know by midseason next March if he's playing in 2027. And then we'll know again in 2028 because of the next part of the contract, which is a $100 million base salary for 2029 would vest if Stafford is on the 10th day of, if Stafford is still on the Rams roster, excuse me, that should also be in Tom Pelissero's tweet here, on the 10th day of the 2028 league year. A dummy year that creates a deadline for the sides to work out a new deal or move on if Stafford, who will turn 40 in February of 2028, intends to keep playing. That dummy year also serves an additional purpose, which we will discuss a little bit later. Lastly, we have Stafford's incentives on the contract. Stafford can earn $5 million in incentives each of the next two seasons, 2.5 for the NFC Championship win and 2.5 for the Super Bowl win, with 70% playing time in each game. So essentially, if Stafford is playing in the NFC Championship and the Rams win next season, or if he's playing in the Super Bowl and the Rams win next season, or in 2027, he earns himself an extra $5 million in incentives. That answers the incentive question. We're going to continue to dive deep on this in just 1 second, guys. But first, I've got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, and that is our friends over at America's #1 sports picks app, Prize Picks. Guys, you know I love playing on Prize Picks. If you're one of our regular users, I love using Prize Picks to make watching sports even more exciting than it already is. And it's a great time to get started with them if you've never used Prize Picks, because the NBA playoffs are well underway. The baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to cash in on all that action than with our friends over at Prize Picks. And it's so easy to play. If you've never played with Prize Picks before, all you have to do is pick from 2 to 6 players from any sport that you want to choose, and you're choosing more or less on their stat projections. Whether you're picking from points, assists, rebounds, hits, home runs, or strikeouts, again, they've got plenty of options from all your favorite sports. Plus, they also have awesome social features. If you don't even know what you want to put together today, that's okay. Just tail or fade your friends or your favorite creators, including me. I'm Jackson Durham. You guys can follow me. I have no spaces in that username, just my first and last name. And you guys can see all of the lineups I've been putting together lately, including this one for Game 6. I'm going with the more on SGA, and I'm going with the more on Victor Wembanyama. So you guys can tail me on this lineup. You could fade me on this lineup. Whatever you do, just do it with Prize Picks. And if you're new to Prize Picks, make sure you use our promo code. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments and the description below. Okay, let's start diving deep here, guys, because I know I just read to you a lot of information, but again, like I said, it's all kind of complicated and none of it really seems to make any sense. It's all just like contract mumbo jumbo. So let's hone in on a couple of things here. 2 important dates to keep in mind. The 3rd day of the new league year of 2027. This will vest Stafford's 2027 salary as a $45 million salary that will guarantee, and then he'll also get an extra $5 million roster bonus. So essentially $50 million is going to guarantee for Stafford in 2027 if he's still on the roster on the 3rd day of that new league year. The other important date to keep in mind here, the 10th day of 2028. There is a trigger here for a $100 million base salary, which is essentially nonsense. Like, don't even worry about that $100 million base salary. There is no world in which the Rams would let Stafford play on a $100 million base salary. They would, if Stafford told them, hey, I'm 40 years old, but I still want to play football in 2028, they would tear up the contract and they would work on a new deal with him. If he does not play, if he retires, that $100 million deal will not vest. That $100 million salary isn't going to vest. And on today's show, we're going to break down exactly why that's such a smart decision for the Rams. Because it all has to do with a little known aspect of contract salary rules. Of the CBA, maybe is a better way to phrase what I'm trying to say here. But it's called the 50% rule. And that's going to be a huge part of today's discussion. Understanding the 50% rule and how it will factor for the Rams in the event that Stafford retires in 2027 is a huge part of understanding why they did this. But the basics. If you take away one thing from this video, understand that the structure of this contract provides the Rams with flexibility. And again, we will dive into the mechanism of how that is, but it provides them with flexibility on 2 fronts. 1, cap flexibility, and 2, year-to-year decision-making flexibility. And that's flexibility for both the Rams and for Matthew Stafford himself. Because again, look, while this deal is great, while it is awesome that Matthew Stafford has signed on for 2027 as of right now, we cannot sit here and say, as much as, and I think maybe I've even been guilty of this on this channel, that this guarantees that 2027 is going to happen. That this guarantees that he's going to play in 2027. It technically doesn't just yet. At this point, it indicates that that's the plan, but it also, anything can happen. At the end of the day, Stafford is 38 years old. At 38, anything can happen in the course of an NFL season. The second year is not guaranteed. So this structure provides the Rams and Matthew Stafford with flexibility, year to year. If either party doesn't want to go forward, which honestly, let's be honest with ourselves, it's really only going to be Matthew Stafford saying, I'm done at the end of the day. I really do not foresee a situation in which the Rams say that they don't want to go forward with Stafford. They have that flexibility. And again, this shouldn't be a big surprise. Adam Grosbard reported on this when Les Snead did his meeting with the media back in March, that they would continue to take a year-to-year approach. Snead hinted at an extension that said it might even come this offseason, but that it wouldn't guarantee a 2027 year. But again, let's go back to contract structure here. Because for those of you who do not know, I also cover the Kansas City Chiefs here at Chat Sports. It doesn't mean I'm a big Chiefs fan. It's just part of my job here. And when I was in that capacity, as part of that capacity, I covered the Kansas City Chiefs extension of Travis Kelce. They locked him up through 2028 on paper, but immediately, when you look into the contract numbers behind this, which we obviously did, it is a 50% rule contract. And that clicked for me right away. The Rams are doing the same thing. The Rams are moving in the exact same direction as what Brett Veach set up for Travis Kelce with a 2026 retirement. Again, we'll talk about the 50% rule, but just understand that Les Snead and Brett Veach are both top of the game general managers. This rule is so underutilized. This rule is so underexploited, and the fact that both of them they are both just at the top of their game. This is just another feather in the cap of Les Snead as one of, if not the best general manager in the NFL. He continues to do everything he can to make this Rams team better, not just in the short term, but also in the long term, with a long-term view of things. So let's talk about the 50% rule at the end of the day, the why behind everything here. The Rams, like I said, are employing a CBA rule called the 50% rule to their advantage. And the structure will allow them to spread Stafford's cap hit across multiple seasons. It says 2. It's actually going to end up being 3 when it's all said and done. But first, let's understand the technical details of Stafford's contract just a little bit more. The total value, if you look across the way everything is structured and you add in all of the triggers, is $200 million, with $34 million of that being guaranteed and $150 million of it being trigger based, if that makes sense. So $50 million in extra trigger guarantees starting next season. So that guaranteed money could go up to $84 million if he decides to play in 2027. It will go up to $84 million if he decides to play in 2027. But the total value, if you include the $100 million dummy year, is $200 million. But again, he is only going to see about $104 million of that when it is all said and done. And here's the reason why. Again, the reason why it is all structured this way is to take advantage of the 50% rule, which I know I've mentioned a couple times. I am now going to finally explain what that actually is to you. So it's also known as the Dion rule, and what it stipulates is that if a player's contract has a second year on it that is less than 50%, the salary or cap hit of that contract is less than 50% of the first year of the contract, it will then prorate the contract across the remainder of the deal rather than have all of that cap hit in 2028. So I know it's kind of complicated, but essentially what is happening here, or will happen here, when Stafford retires after 2027, or if the Rams make a new decision on a contract, they will not have to pay the dead cap money in 2028. They can spread the dead cap money from 2028 to 2030 across all 3 of those cap seasons, because there are still 2 remaining void years on Stafford's contract that run through 2029 and 2030. So all of this to say, the Rams have structured this in a way that when Matthew Stafford retires, the dead cap hit will be essentially negligible because they'll take it over 3 seasons rather than taking it all in 2028, providing them with cap flexibility for the future. Again, this helps the Rams maintain future flexibility. And they already have a lot of it. We talked about this pretty recently when we were talking about Puka's extension and the other extensions that the Rams have to handle, but they have a lot of cap space across 2027 to 2028, and they even still have some room left in 2026 if they wanted to make another move. But this is all part of the Rams' long-term planning strategy for life without number 9. At the end of the day, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say this, the Rams realize, I think very smartly here, that this team is bigger than Matthew Stafford. And that going all in on 2026 does not have to mean you're terrible in 2027, 2028, and 2029. There are ways to win a Super Bowl in 2026 and remain, if not Super Bowl winning in 2027, 2028, and 2029, highly competitive in all of those seasons, even if Matthew Stafford was to step away. And this structure allows them to do that. Again, in tandem with the decision to go out and get Ty Simpson in this year's draft, you now have a team that has prepared itself for life without its quarterback, its current franchise quarterback, in multiple ways. They've A, negotiated his cap hit down to a point where it'll be negligible, but B, they've prepared his successor, and they've set a timeline. At this point, this contract and the structure of it, I think, sets the timeline for Ty Simpson as, hey, ideally, Stafford plays 2 more years. Ideally, Stafford is here for 2026 and for 2027. And then it's your show, Ty. It's going to be all about Ty Simpson. So he has 2 years, hopefully, to prepare, to study up behind Matthew Stafford, to study from one of the greatest quarterbacks who's ever done it, one of the greatest offensive minds in our game right now and of all time in Sean McVay, and from everyone else on this Rams staff to prepare himself to be the starter, to prove the Rams right on their decision to draft him 13th overall as they continue to, A, go out and compete for a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford and take care of him financially while also maintaining an eye forward for, hey, we don't want to have a $40 million dead cap hit slam in when Matthew Stafford decides to retire because we took care of him financially. So how do we protect ourselves against that while also taking care of a guy who has done so many great things for Los Angeles? Again, just cannot give enough props to Les Snead for finding a way to juggle all of these things. Everything that we're talking about is highly interconnected. Even though it seems like several different decisions, it is all one spider web of decision-making that helps keep the Rams competitive for a next decade timeline, hopefully. And again, if it works, it is just masterclass work by Les Snead. And even if it doesn't, he had the balls to take the chance. And I think at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. You have to try to prepare. You have to have a plan in place, and you have to be willing to take chances on what you believe is going to work and what you believe is best for your football team. And I think Les Snead has always proven himself willing to do that. At the end of the day, that's really what it's all about, Rams fans. And that's going to do it for us on today's episode of the Rams Report. Thank you for tuning in. I know this was a long one. I know we dove deep on some pretty complicated CBA rules and a lot of numbers. So thank you for bearing with me. If you are still here, make sure you hit that like button. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. And as always, let's go Rams.